Kinshade Stories community, I'm glad you're here. What I'm about to share has genuinely shaken me. He came into my office on a Tuesday afternoon, and the first thing I noticed was that he wasn't crying. Most people who sit across from me for the first time are either holding back tears or already past them. Not him. He sat completely still, hands flat on his thighs, staring at a fixed point somewhere behind my left shoulder. He had driven 7 hours to see me, not because I was the closest therapist, because I was the only one he was certain his family had never heard of. He said he needed to tell someone the truth before he lost the nerve to say it out loud. And then he told me something that took me a full 30 seconds to process. He said that for the past 11 years, his entire family, his wife, his 3 kids, his siblings, his elderly mother, had believed he was a successful financial consultant running his own firm, that he had been flying to Chicago twice a month for client meetings, that the money coming into their account was his. He said none of it was true, not a single word of it. And then he told me the part that made my skin go cold. The person who had been paying for his family's life for over a decade, the house, the cars, the kids' private school tuition, his mother's assisted living facility, was a man his wife had never met, a man whose name she did not know, a man who had his own reasons for keeping Clifford afloat, and those reasons had just come due. Before I go any further, I want to say something important. Every situation I share on this channel is unique. What one person experienced, the choices they made, the circumstances that shaped them, cannot be applied as a template to anyone else's life. Human beings are complicated. Families are complicated. If anything in today's story touches something close to home for you, please reach out to a licensed professional. What I share here is never a substitute for real, personalized care. These stories exist to open conversations, not to close them. His name was Clifford. He was 43 years old when he first came to see me. He lived in Boise, Idaho, with his wife of 16 years, Renee, and their 3 children, ages 14, 11, and 8 at the time. He described himself as a husband and a father first. Everything else, he said, was secondary. He had a calm way of speaking, measured. He chose his words carefully, the way people do when they have spent a long time rehearsing what they're going to say. He had been rehearsing this, he told me, about 8 months, ever since the phone call that changed everything. I want to start from the beginning, because the beginning matters. Clifford grew up in a small town in eastern Oregon. He was the oldest of 4 kids. His father left when Clifford was 9, and his mother worked 2 jobs to keep the family together. He described her as the strongest person he had ever known. He said that with a kind of reverence that told me everything I needed to know about how much her opinion of him mattered. He graduated high school, got a partial scholarship to a state university, and studied business. He was, by all accounts, smart. Not exceptional, he was careful to say that, but smart enough. He graduated with decent grades, got a job at a mid-sized financial firm in Portland, and spent his late 20s working his way up. He met Renee at 26. They married at 27. He said she was the kind of woman who made you want to be better. He said that without irony. I believed him. By his early 30s, things started to slide. Not dramatically, just steadily. The firm he worked for restructured. His position was eliminated. He picked up contract work, then lost it. He picked up freelance consulting, which was inconsistent. He said there were months where he made almost nothing. And through it all, he told Renee things were fine. He told her the firm was doing well. He invented clients. He invented meetings. He invented revenue. He said the first lie was small, just to buy himself time, he thought, just until he figured it out. He said that to himself over and over again for years, just until I figure it out. I asked him, when did you realize the lies had become the structure, that there was no longer a version of your life underneath them? He thought about that for a moment. He said, probably around year 4, when my oldest started at her private school, and I knew I couldn't pull her out without explaining why. I had already told Renee the school was covered, that I had a client who paid a retainer every quarter that handled it. There was no client, there was no retainer. I asked him where the money was actually coming from. That was when the room got very quiet. His name was Gerald. Clifford had met him through a mutual contact at a business event in Portland about 12 years earlier. Gerald was older, Clifford guessed late 60s at the time, wealthy, kept a low profile. He ran what Clifford described as a private investment holding company, though Clifford was careful to say he never fully understood what that meant in practice. Gerald's had taken an interest in him, offered occasional consulting work, small jobs at first, reviewing documents, attending meetings on Gerald's behalf, signing off on certain communications. Clifford said he told himself it was legitimate. He said he needed to believe that. Over time, the payments got larger, and the jobs got murkier. Clifford said he reached a point where he stopped asking questions. The money was real. It was consistent. It covered the school. It covered the mortgage. It covered his mother's assisted living facility, which by that point was running nearly $5,000 a month. He said he thought of it as a silent business arrangement, something he would eventually be able to explain away. He said he told himself I was protecting my family. I genuinely believed that. I don't think I was lying to myself completely. I think I had started to see the money as separate from where it came from, like it passed through enough hands that it became clean. I didn't challenge that in the moment. I just listened. The phone call came on a Thursday morning in late October. Clifford was in the kitchen when Gerald's assistant called. Not Gerald himself, his assistant. She said Gerald had passed away 3 weeks earlier. Clifford said he felt the floor go out from under him, but not from grief, from what came next. She told him that Gerald's estate was being reviewed, that certain financial relationships were going to be examined as part of the process, that Clifford's name appeared in several documents, that he might want to speak to an attorney. He hung up and stood in his kitchen for 20 minutes without moving. His daughter came downstairs and asked him if he was okay. He said he told her he was just tired. She poured herself a bowl of cereal and left for school. He watched her go. He spent the next 8 months doing 2 things simultaneously. He hired a private attorney, paid for with money he had quietly set aside, the only money he was certain was his, and he tried to figure out how to tell Renee. He said he wrote the conversation out longhand 17 times. He never got past the first paragraph. He came to me before he spoke to her. He said he needed to understand what he had done before he tried to explain it to someone else. I asked him, "What do you believe you did?" He said, "I took a life I couldn't afford, and I found a way to fund it that I could never tell anyone about, and I told myself for 11 years that the day would come when I could fix it, make it real, replace the fake version with something legitimate, and that day never came, and now it might all come apart in a way I can't control." I asked him, "And the people reviewing Gerald's estate, do you know yet what they're going to find?" He said, "My attorney says it depends on how deep they go. Some of what I did was probably legal. Some of it, she's not sure." That was the first session. He came back the following week. In the second session, he told me something I had not expected, something that recontextualized everything he had told me the week before. He said that 2 days after our first appointment, he had finally gone through the full set of documents his attorney had requested from Gerald's estate records, and in those documents, he found something, a letter written by Gerald, dated 3 years earlier. In it, Gerald had explained to his own legal team why he had been quietly funding Clifford's family. Gerald was Clifford's biological father. Clifford had been adopted at birth. He knew that. His mother had always been honest about it. What she had never told him, what she had carried alone for 43 years, was that she knew who the biological father was, that Gerald had come to her when Clifford was in his early 30s, had told her who he was, and asked for her permission to quietly help, not to introduce himself, not to disrupt anything, just to help. She had said yes. She had never told Clifford. Gerald had never told him either. The letter made clear that Gerald had intended to tell him eventually. He just never got the chance. Clifford sat across from me when he told me this, and he said, he wasn't using me. He was taking care of me, and I never even knew his name meant anything. His hands were shaking. It was the first time I saw his composure break. He said, "My mother knew. She let me spend 11 years in the dark. She watched me struggle, and she never said a word." I let that sit in the room for a moment before I said anything. There was a lot to work through. Grief first, real grief for a man he had never known as a father, for a relationship that existed in documents and wire transfers and a letter he read alone in his attorney's office. I explained to Clifford that grief doesn't require a full relationship to be real. You can grieve something you never fully had. In fact, sometimes that kind of grief is the hardest because there's no clear memory to hold onto, no moment to point to and say, that was real, that was ours. The loss is abstract and enormous at the same time. We talked about his mother. That was the part that kept circling back session after session. He loved her. He had always described her as the one person in his life who was entirely honest. Discovering that she had held this secret, that she had made a unilateral decision that shaped the entire arc of his adult life, was destabilizing in a way that the financial revelations weren't. Financial problems, he said, felt solvable. You can do things about money. You can work with attorneys. You can make plans. But when the person you have trusted most turns out to have kept something this fundamental from you, that shakes something that doesn't have an easy fix. I explained to him that what his mother did came from a place we had to try to understand, even if we couldn't immediately accept it. Attachment theory tells us that the people who love us most are sometimes the ones who protect us in ways that cost us clarity. She made a decision to shield him from something she thought would upend his identity. She may have been wrong. She probably was wrong. But the intention was protection, not deception for its own sake. That distinction matters, even when the outcome was painful. Together, we looked at the question of what he actually wanted to do with what he now knew. He didn't have to confront her. He didn't have to stay silent either. I reminded him that knowing the truth doesn't automatically require action. Sometimes the first job is simply to sit with it, to let it become real before deciding what to do next. We talked about his relationship with Renee. He had not told her yet. We spent several sessions working toward that conversation, not scripting it. I never believe in scripting these conversations, but helping him understand what he was actually trying to say. I asked him once, "What do you want Renee to understand that she doesn't understand right now?" He said that I was trying to keep everything together, that I didn't do this out of selfishness. I did it because I was terrified of being the man my father was, the man who left. I said, then that's where you start. We talked about cognitive distortion, specifically the way Clifford had spent over a decade reframing his actions to himself. When we're afraid, our minds are remarkably good at constructing narratives that make our choices seem reasonable. He hadn't been lying to protect himself, he had been lying to protect his family. He had genuinely come to believe those were different things. Part of our work together was helping him see that the distinction, however real it felt, didn't change the impact on the people around him. Both things could be true. His intention was protection, and his method caused harm. He did eventually tell Renee. He called me the day after that conversation. He said it went the way he feared, and also better than he feared, if that makes any sense. She was angry, very angry. She needed time. But she didn't leave. He said she cried for a long time and then said, "Why didn't you just tell me? We could have figured it out." He said he didn't have a good answer for that. I told him that was actually progress. Knowing you don't have a good answer is different from believing you do. His mother. He went to see her about 6 weeks after discovering the letter. He told me about it in the session after. He said he sat down with her and he asked her directly. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I thought knowing would hurt you more than not knowing." He said he told her she was wrong. He said she cried. He held her hand through it. He told me, "I'm angry, and I love her, and I don't know how to hold both of those things at the same time." I told him that was exactly where he needed to be. Both things were true. You don't have to resolve them immediately. Sometimes love and anger live side by side for a long time before one of them shifts. The legal situation is ongoing. His attorney believes the exposure is limited. Gerald's estate, it turns out, was structured carefully. The payments to Clifford were documented internally as consulting fees. Whether that holds up under scrutiny is still being determined. He's cooperating fully. That counts for something. He's still in treatment, still working, still married, still going to see his mother on Sundays. Before I let you go today, I want to ask you something. Clifford spent 11 years maintaining a version of his life that wasn't real, not out of greed, but out of fear. Fear of failure, fear of being the father who couldn't provide, fear of being seen as less than what his family needed. And that fear cost him more than any financial loss ever could. So I want to ask you, is there something in your own life, a version of yourself you've been maintaining for someone else that you've been too afraid to let go of? What would it cost you to finally tell the truth? Not to tear everything down, but to be honest about where you actually are. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments below. If today's story moved you, if it made you think, please like this video. It helps more people find stories like this one. And if you haven't subscribed to Kinshade Stories yet, I hope today was the one that convinced you. I'll see you in the next one.